FOMO, the fear of missing out. This is a trap that a lot of wargamers fall into, I myself included, but not when it comes to Games Workshop, the company that is most associated with fear of missing out marketing. I don't feel like it's that big of a draw for me. Games Workshop's typical FOMO style is to put a bunch of products in a single box together and sell it at a discount. But it's usually not even that good. It's usually like a couple of cool things and one thing that nobody really cares about. And if you buy it right now, you'll save like $20. But that doesn't even mean anything. Games Workshop products are available for so long. If I just bought a single box here and there over the course of a year, I'll probably have saved $20 anyway, and I didn't miss out on anything. I've got a pretty good wall for escaping Games Workshop's FOMO, but there is a FOMO pitfall I fall into, and that is other games. I am really bad about other games. I buy so many starter sets and so many models for other games because I'm going to my friend the local game store and I see something on the shelf, and usually it's just one model. I'm like, ooh, I like that model. And most people are able to just buy that model, paint it, have it in their collection, love it. But I see that one model and I'm like, ooh, maybe I just have to buy everything so that I get to play with that one model. I'm really bad about it. I mean, Infinity, Malifaux, Armada, Arena Rex, Relic Blade. I have so many games in various stages of completion, and I don't want to do it until I can really do it, until I have beautifully painted armies and full scenic boards of terrain. And it's pretty unreasonable to put that on myself, but the last game to catch my eye, I'm pretty darn close on. Moonstone is a lovely fantasy fairy tale game that has caught my eye and kept my attention for long enough that I am this close to actually achieving my hobby dream of having another perfect, complete game in the bag. Around Christmas time last year, I saw Goblin King Games doing a sale and I bought a lot of models. What drew me in was these diminutive fairies. Why, you ask? Well, it's because it's something so absolutely different than I can get from any other war game. It seems like all games have some sort of future soldier, a space marine if you will, but these little fairy folk are totally new. And that brand new challenge made me pull the trigger. I've been jumping around from painting project to painting project, but these fairies have remained on my desk all year and I've gotten a good number of them done. Introducing Gwendolyn, the priestess and healer of the glaive. Foxglove, the inept rogue who once in a while punches well above his weight. Diana, queen of the fae, who saps her fellow fairies' health to make her spells more powerful. And Belladonna, the unpredictable poisoner. It's impossible to predict what her concoctions will do, but whatever it is, it's gonna be bad. I have had so much fun painting these models up, and I've done them to my highest level. Moonstone is a game of characters. There's no chaff, no goons. Everyone is a named character with lore. According to the rules, 4 models is perfect for a 3-player game, and I really want to try out a 3-player miniature war game. On my Diana Queen of the Fae model, I did a little something special on her wings. Leave a comment if you recognize those wings. If you know, you know. I've got my crew all done, and now it is time to make the terrain, the world of Moonstone. And I find that world so interesting, I made my own. For the month of September, we here at EonsOfBattle are proud to announce the Whimsical Cottages. Fantasy buildings perfect for any game with a ye olde flair. Move your models around the quaint homes, the roomy houses, or set up shop with the tavern. With this terrain, you can make an entire town complete with pumpkins, giant mushrooms, and trees to really fill out a game board. You can find this terrain at EonsOfBattle.com. Not only is EonsOfBattle.com the place to find our merch like our Nick and Jay dice, but it is the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members get a credit they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. Everything printed beautifully, thanks to Tech Resin, the best 3D printing resin on the market. If you want to try it for yourself, you can shop with the code EonsOfBattle to get 8% off. I prime my buildings in black. I should probably have hopped outside to use a rattle can, but I'm feeling lazy today, so I didn't want to get out of my chair. After a coat of primer, I blasted all the roofs with some red-brown. I didn't give them a perfect base coat, more of a zenithal to let plenty of that black shine through in the recesses. I loaded up my dry palette, which is also the top of my wet palette, and went to town at dry brushing. I want my roofs to be really warm in color. This is the first time I'm doing any fantasy scenery, so I'm gonna try and stick with bright saturated colors. After the dry brushing, I put some speed paint onto my palette and started picking out tiles randomly using Satchel Brown. I hit about 1 in 10 shingles and then did the same thing with the red beige color, Goddess Glow, to make my roofs have a patchwork look. After that, I dry brushed yellow over the shingles, just giving these a light dusting to hit the edges of each shingle. This tied them all together and helped to warm up the overall look. This worked really well. I decided to go ahead and follow this recipe on all the roofs. My fantasy village will have one uniform look. I don't know why, maybe it's just experiencing painting something brand new to me, but I really want to play in a fantasy environment. I've only played one singular game of Moonstone, but I want to get this painted up fast. Moonstone is a skirmish game, and what sets it apart from other games is the combat system. To do a melee attack, both players pull from a deck of cards and compare, and ranged attacks are even more unique. Both players pull from a hand of cards, and the attacker announces what card they're playing, and the other player either agrees or calls their bluff. And there's pros and cons to calling or staying. It's a really fun mechanic. I've got the roofs of my fairy tale cottages all done, and I am very pleasantly surprised. I really want to do a very good job on this terrain, and I had the ghost of an idea in my head to do scratchy highlights on all the roof tiles. That would have been a bad idea. It would have taken an unbelievable amount of time, and I don't think it would have been looked as good as just a little bit of speed paint and dry brushing. And that gets me really excited to tackle the flooring. I've never painted a good old-fashioned wood floor before, so I tried to reuse my roof recipe. I sprayed some tan over the brown flooring, then I picked out some accent colors, a red brown and a dark brown wash, and I started picking out floor planks randomly. I did this to all the flooring across my village, and then I put a brown wash over everything. I like what the wash did for the texture, but looking at my floor, it just doesn't look right. It's very desaturated. I think my original red, brown, and tan paint must have had some blue and yellow in them because they ended up very gray. I think I can fix it though. I took a super saturated raw sienna semi-transparent ink and I sprayed this over top. This tinted my flooring and brought back that tan. Then I sprayed some burnt umber ink around the edges to make them darker and more saturated. This worked great. I was really feeling down because I didn't like how the floor looked, but now the floor is my favorite parts. While I had the transparent burnt umber in my airbrush, I did some subtle shading on the roof and then gave the flooring a light dry brushing of tan to hit all the nails sticking up. This flooring is not barefoot safe. The roof is done, the floor is done, it's time for the walls, and I think I'm done with speed paint and washes. It's time for some good old-fashioned painting, but painting with a twist. I put some desaturated green, gray, and cream onto my palette and loaded up a dry brush. Dry brushes, not just for dry brushing, they work well as paintbrushes too, especially for larger surfaces. I laid down my green, then stippled and rubbed on some gray, and I finished it up with my cream. The dry brush gave me a nice texture and took advantage of the uneven surface of the walls themselves to give me an interesting look. It took quite a bit of time, but it was worth it. Using my airbrush or glazing with a normal paint wouldn't have given me the same effect. And it let me miss all the woodwork on the model too. On top of the cream, I did a little bit of sponging of white paint to add even more texture. Once the walls were done, I moved on to the rock texture on some of the bigger buildings. I dry brushed these with gray paint and then I put a brown-black speed paint over the rocks. This went on really opaque, so to fix this, I rubbed it off the flat surfaces of the stone with a wet paper towel. Then I dry brushed a light gray and a final dry brushing of a dark tan color. I fixed any mistakes I made along the way, getting all these colors onto my wood beams by reapplying my brown base coat, and I gave everything made of wood a nice dark brown wash. The wash gave me my recessed shades, now it's time for the highlights. For wood, my mind immediately wants to go to a tan color, but I want this terrain to be warm and colorful, so instead I dry brushed on some yellow paint. The yellow as a highlight worked perfectly, and then I dry brushed just a little bit of tan over this. The brown plus the yellow plus tan all came together to give me nice healthy looking wood. I got my little fantasy cottages all painted up, and it's a really weird new experience. I have painted so much terrain, but 99.9% of it has all been sci-fi, and that's super fun. When I play 40K and other sci-fi games, I'm surrounded by steel girders and rivets and I-beams and blood. But now, I've got some really cool fantasy stuff with a lot of whimsy. And speaking of whimsy, this set has a lot of whimsy to it. On the roomy house and tavern, the architecture has trees integrated into the buildings. And to paint these trees, I did some wet blending, slapping down a dark brown paint and then using the same brush to apply some green, rubbing these colors together to give me a nice natural looking tree trunk. Once that was done, I dry brushed some brown and then some tan. My dry brushes are really getting a workout today. Next up, the giant mushrooms on the tavern. Some people eat mushrooms, but my villagers use them in architecture. These shrooms make up the porch of the local tavern. I airbrushed the mushroom stems with a red-brown and then a cream color, and then I glazed on a dark red along the perimeter of each toadstool, and then I put bright red in the middle. Then I put a red wash over everything. Once that was dry, I dry brushed red over the tops and then tan over the stems. I lost a little vibrancy with the wash, so I gave each shroom a puff of red in the middle with my airbrush. Then I picked out all the little mushroom pimples with the same color I used on the stems. Nothing says fairy tale like big ol' mushrooms. And speaking of fairy tales, every board needs some scatter terrain. These sci-fi barrels are one of my favorite terrain pieces we have ever made. And what is the fantasy version of a palette and supplies? You guessed it, pumpkins. I sprayed on some dark red on the bottoms of each of my plants, and then yellow from the top. Then I sprayed some tan from above just to make them a little bit brighter. And I put brown paint into my airbrush and turned the PSI way down so that I would just spit some blemishes onto my gourds. This is all my base coat, now for the colors. I loaded up my palette with some speed paints and slobbered these on, putting green over the leaves, brown over the vines, and orange over the pumpkins. I used some of the paint I had left over from my buildings and dry brushed some highlights over the plants, using green over the leaves and vines and yellow and tan over the pumpkins. I felt like they were still lacking a little vibrancy, and we all know the solution to that: inks. I airbrushed orange over the pumpkins and a little bit of red from the bottom, which spiced them up nicely. One more little round of dry brushing and my melons were done. Then the last little thing is the tavern's clock. I want it to be a nice reflective copper, and to get that reflection, I made myself a stencil. The base coat is a red brown, and the reflective highlight is a red tan. Then I dry brushed on some gold for the glitter factor. Then I put some blotches of verdigris onto the face. Once this was done, I dribbled on some super glue and I stuck it down to the front of my roof. I've never had much fantasy terrain in my collection, but now I've got quite a bit of it. There is one more step before I can put the cherry on top of my Moonstone collection. And unlike creating this lovely terrain, the last step is a little bit more destructive. I love a themed gaming mat. I've got this one for Fallout Wasteland Warfare, this one for Star Wars X-Wing and Armada, although I've never played Armada. And this really fun one is for a game called Arena Rex. Now, Moonstone is played on a 3x3 gaming surface, and I don't have a great mat for a 3x3, but I do have one mat in mind. This mat, our first mat, the first mat that we ever bought, and it has seen better days. We actually don't play on this one anymore for a couple of reasons. We bought this mat 10 years ago, and for some reason, the rubber is starting to dry out and crack. We have other mats, none that are quite this old, but none of them are drying out and cracking. And really the big flaw of this mat is we accidentally poured 3D printing resin on it, and it made a giant poisonous stain. But I think that this is gonna be great fodder because it's an old school mat. It is a 4x8, and I think out of this mat, I can get a lovely 3x3. I have never cut up a neoprene mat before, but I think I have everything I need. I measured out how much I need to cut off to get rid of the yucky dried out parts, and then I laid down some painter's tape. Fabric doesn't like to be sliced with a blade, and I'm hoping that the tape will stop the fabric from stretching or bunching up under the blade. I sliced through with a fresh box cutter blade and a huge straight edge, and it worked like a charm. I sliced a few inches off of each side, making it 36 inches on the width, and for the length, the stars aligned and fate gave me just enough clean mat to cut it to 36 inches, cutting off the toxic resin spill. Wow, that actually worked out pretty much perfectly. And now I can throw out the poison section, and it's like I got a brand new mat. A mat that is perfect for our terrain. It looks so good. Oh, we got a little Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear thing going on. Oh, I've never had this kind of terrain, this like kind of cutesy medieval style of terrain, but it feels so right. I mean, this is the classic wargaming. I guess it's not World War II, but it's pretty darn close. I have been having so much fun with Moonstone. I've only played one singular game, but that game was really, really fun. I've got 4 miniatures done, but my buddy Larry, he has pretty much every single one of the miniatures, and he lent them to me to show off to you guys in this video. The world of Moonstone is a super fun fairy tale fantasy land. And also it's nice to have this terrain because I'm also getting a little bit into Age of Sigmar. Behind the scenes, I have been furiously working on getting my army's tabletop ready. But y'all better believe that I'm gonna be packing this stuff up and heading to the local game store really soon to get some more reps in of Moonstone. This is the very first time I've actually accomplished my goal of having like a perfect, like store display level kit for a different game. And I'm so happy that it's Moonstone. I've been having so much fun with this game. And this video is not sponsored by Goblin King Games, but they did give us a code that we can give to you guys if you're interested in any Moonstone miniatures. Shop with the code EONS10 to save 10% off the regular Moonstone miniatures range. That code excludes the new models and limited editions coming out in the very near future. And don't forget that this fun, flavorful fantasy terrain is available on our website. What makes our website so great is it's a credit system, so you can get this terrain, our newest set, or any previous set we have ever made. I have finally done it. I have another miniature war game in the bag. It feels pretty good. Now I'm gonna be loading all this stuff into my car, heading down to the friendly local game store. Thanks for watching.